Hey everybody, it's Friday night, and I'm jdsimomusic coming to you from the funky basement. I've returned from my first travels since February. We're gonna have some fun, got some fun stuff in store, and right now, let's boogie a little, alright? jdsimomusic coming at you from the funky basement in the house of Grease. Just got home. Can't believe I'm saying it, but I just got home and had a wonderful time. Actually, I'd like to raise a Weber's root beer to all the fine folks of Tulsa for having me this week at Cane's. Man, that is the best root beer in the world. It really is. Love it. So, yeah, had a great time. Went and did a very safe, very well thought out, socially distanced concert at the historic Cane's Ballroom in Tulsa, Oklahoma, one of my favorite places. Got to see my good friend Brian Horton from Horton Records there, and got to see from afar, of course, then masked up, you know, a bunch of people I really care about, people who have a lot to do with the Woody Guthrie Center there in Tulsa. There's a new Bob Dylan museum that's being put in the art complex next to the Woody Guthrie Museum. The old church studio that Leon Russell and J.J. Cale and Freddie King and Rod Cooter, a bunch of other people, made really great records at, is now open again there in Tulsa. The new Pop Art Museum is going to be open, and Tulsa is really a happening place. They're working on the right side of the force, and it was an honor to get to go and actually did my first duo show with my compadre Adam Abershoff, which was a total gas. I don't know how many of you may have tuned in or saw it, but it was really good, and we're going to be doing some more of those coming up, as well as full band and me doing solo stuff. It's a nice, and also doing the blues band with Patrick Sweeney. There's a whole bunch of stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute. But welcome to the show. We got Mr. Earl Hooker welcoming you in today. He's one of our topics of discussion tonight on Greasy Time. I'll come back to the home screen and throw up my logo and throw up the Venmo and PayPal. And as always, folks, thank you so much for your contributions. It really means a lot. It's greatly appreciated. Even if it's only $5 or $10, it's like, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And if you like what you see, throw some in the jug there for me. Thank you very much. So, big news coming up in the coming weeks before we jump into the task at hand. This upcoming Wednesday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. Central, I will be joined once again by my dear friends Patrick Sweeney, who a lot of you might know, one of my favorite singers, guitar players, fellow lover of all the things that I love. I got a lot of respect and love for Pat. My dear friend Adam Bednarik, and as always on the Boom Booms, Mr. Adam Abershoff, the Play Blues, Don't Play No Rock live stream. We will be streaming live at 7:30, or at 7 p.m., I'm sorry, this upcoming Wednesday, September 23rd. And it's actually going to be through the platform Stage It. Go to either my Facebook page or my Instagram page, and there's info on the post. Just click on when you see this photo of us, click on it, and it gives you the information and the link to the actual show page. And Stage It, I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff with them coming up in the near future. It's a really lovely platform where we can live stream full band shows at a specific time, just like any other normal show. And you can actually set your ticket price, and it's, once the show's over, it's done. It doesn't get archived or anything. You're actually seeing the show go down as it happens. And this was a really, really fun thing that we did about 2 months ago. We got together and played some old school real blues, and we're doing it again. So click on the link. Like I said, go. I'll actually, when this gets posted on YouTube, I'll post a link to it in the description for that as well. But check it out. It's going to be fun. Junior Kimbrough, Magic Sam, Lightning Hopkins, Earl Hooker. You get the deal. No rock, just blues, just real blues. No wanking. Thank you again for another great week of streams and everything. The new record is out. If you haven't checked out the new record, check it out. Go to the Bandcamp site, jdsimomusic Bandcamp. Just Google that and it'll come right up. You can order vinyl and t-shirt bundles. We've got the new t-shirts as well as the Greasy Time shirts. Thank you very much for checking those out, and continue to stream the record. And we actually, the Gleam contest is now over. We have our winners. Our grand prize winner just got informed today, from what I understand, and there's 10 other winners that are getting prize bundles and stuff. So thank you very much to those who participated. So the one thing, moving here into the next couple of weeks, this is actually going to be my last episode of Greasy Time for a few weeks, because I'm actually not going to be around. These private shows that have started to become fairly normal. We did our first one last week, our first full band one last week, and we're doing our second full band one this upcoming week, next week, and then there's a few more coming up after that. And if that's something that you'd be interested in, it's something that I never thought it would be. It never really occurred to me, but it's something that's becoming something that's really fun and very, very emotionally, how shall I say, it's just a really, to get to share music with people in such an intimate way is really proving to be something really awesome and really special. So we're definitely doing those in small groups now, like 15 fans or so. But if that's something that you would be interested in, either full band, which we're equipped to do and have been able to do successfully and safely, or Adam and I actually have some duo ones coming up. It just depends on what you want, and it's reach out to the jdsimomusic at gmail.com address there at the bottom of your screen, and it will get forwarded on to the powers that be, and we can get it worked out. It's really becoming something that's really fun, really unique, and awesome. So, love to do it. So, moving on, I'd like to hop right into the records of the week. I got some really good ones for you. My favorite record by far this past week has been this record right here. I never knew this existed. This is Cannonball Adderley. Cannonball is no surprise probably to you jazz fans out there. Cannonball is definitely in the league of the John Coltrane's and the Wayne Shorters and Ornette Colemans of the world, as one of the premier tenor players of all time. This is a collection. This is actually called Walk Tall, and it's on Spotify. And this is a whole collection of recordings he made with David Axelrod, which I couldn't believe that even happened. I'm a huge David Axelrod fan. I've talked about him here on the show. David was an instrumental artist in the late 60s, early 70s in Los Angeles. He made some incredibly psychedelic and funky records, most notably with members of the Wrecking Crew. And Song of Innocence, his first record in particular, is a Desert Island record for me, and his influence is all over this collection. It's a mixture of live performances and studio performances, and to hear Cannonball, who mostly was, most of the recordings that I know of from Cannonball, the classic ones at least, are real heavy bop, and so to hear him in this sort of noisy, fuzzy, psychedelic landscape doing his thing is just really, really cool. That's definitely my favorite record that I found this week, and I didn't know I didn't even know it existed. Another thing I didn't know existed is this right here. This is just a little EP from a tiny little label called Crash that only existed for less than a year, and there are like 4 tracks on this of unreleased Magic Sam from the early 60s, which I'm assuming it's probably before he went to prison. And I'd never heard this stuff before. And so it just goes to show you, if you just keep looking, you never know what you're going to find. So this is, I really dig the Jimmy Dobbins tracks in particular. The Steelers tracks are cool too. The Jimmy Dobbins tracks are cool. But to hear unreleased Magic Sam from early on was a really big treat. I couldn't believe it when I found it. So definitely check that out. We have some new music that came out this week from really good buddies of mine. First, my buddy Patrick Sweeney, the Get That Feelin' Volume 1 just came out, the full EP of it. And I've talked about, because the single was released, I guess, about maybe 6 weeks ago or something. I talked about it then. I talked about the single then. This is the full EP, and I do think this is the best stuff he's ever done, and he's obviously a very dear friend, and I just think he's one of the best out there, folks. And this just dropped today. I've become good friends with the GA20 boys up in Boston. This is Live Volume 1. It just dropped today, and Stubbs, I don't know if you're tuning in, but I am wearing my GA20 shirt tonight, so I love you guys. And they're one of my favorite bands going right now. You know what? I will raise a Weber's to you, my dear friends in GA20. You guys are definitely on the right side of the force. Proud to know you. Ah, yes. So, that brings me into a couple of vinyls I want to talk about. stuff I've talked about before, but things that I posted about on Instagram and stuff. Obviously, Junior Wells' Hoodoo Man Blues. I did a post about this the other day, and it's surprising to me that anybody would not have torn this record apart several times over at this point, because this is a very iconic, I think this is kind of, in the Live at the Regal kind of pantheon of blues records. But nonetheless, this is just a great snapshot in time. In particular, the bass player on this record is the great Jack Myers, who was a kind of a real stalwart of the Chicago scene. He played some with Magic Sam, he played with Otis Rush, and he played with Buddy Guy quite a bit through the 60s. And anyway, the one thing I want to talk about in regards to the Hoodoo Man Blues record is how, I'm a fan of reverb and tremolo and echo chambers and all this kind of stuff. I love all that. But the Hoodoo Man record is probably the only record I know of from that early, we're talking mid-60s. That thing's dry as a bone, man. Everything's right up in your face. There's no reverb on the guitar. There's the voice is dry. And that's a really interesting thing about the Hoodoo Man record, is that it's like it sounded like nothing else in its like peer group at that time. And that's something that not a lot of people talk about. And I've talked about this record way too many times on this show, but I just found a first pressing of the Jimmy Dawkins Fast Fingers record. This is actually the original cover. I'm so excited about this. I found it very inexpensively on Discogs. But I love this record so much. It's such a big influence on me. Jimmy Dawkins is incredibly underrated and overlooked, and this is one of my favorite Chicago blues records that has ever been made. And so anyway, I'm just really proud of this record. It sounds killer, but yeah, I found a first pressing of it. So there's your records of the week. Okay, so moving on from there, I think I'm going to play another tune for you, and sort of keep it in the sort of Earl Hooker vein. So do a thing called Universal Rock. It's just a shuffle, baby. It's just a fancy word for a shuffle. Ain't nothing to it. This will be in the key of G for good boy. So all right. Yeah, we'll do it like that. Some Earl Hooker for you on a Friday night. I'm going to take a swig of root beer after that. Universal Rock from the Chief Sessions. Essentially, Earl Hooker cut dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of little funky instrumentals like that I don't know, they're just a happy place. I just can listen to them and love them, and I just love their simplicity. They're funky. They tell a story. So good. So good. So, I would be remiss if I didn't say some words, I feel, about the late, great Jimi Hendrix. Here's a great photo I found of him playing with the Isley Brothers on tour when he was actually living here in Nashville. And I'm really fascinated, especially with Jimi's life before he became Jimi Hendrix. Because he was in with all of the coolest folks, man. Like, you know, all of the R&B guys that were touring at that time. Obviously, the Isley Brothers, Wilson Pickett, Curtis Knight. You know, he was learning, you know, Curtis Mayfield. I'm sure that he did shows with the Impressions, open for him. You know, obviously he played with Little Richard. You know, I mean, it's just to have the front row seat that he had to learn from the masters of R&B in the heyday of it is pretty remarkable. Here's another great photo that's been seen a million times. This is actually an old club in Printers Alley here in Nashville, and that's Billy Cox playing bass up front there. This is actually an earlier photo from when he was still in the Army, stationed at Fort Campbell up in Clarksville. And this is another great photo that I found that I'd never seen before. This is Jimi over there on the right, backing up Esther Phillips, who was an R&B singer, jazz singer. But look at the two cats that are in the band with him. That's King Curtis, the King Curtis on saxophone. And right next to him, and right next to Jimi, behind Esther Phillips, that's Cornell Dupree. I mean, good Lord almighty, man. I mean, it's just so hip, man. So hip. 50 years ago, we lost Jimi. And I'm not going to say anything that, you know, has been said a million times before. You know, his influence on rock music and blues and popular music and culture and all that kind of stuff in general is well documented. But the thing that I want to reiterate, the point that I want to make in tribute to Jimi is kind of like John Bonham. There's other examples too, but John Bonham comes to mind, where it's like it's really easy to focus on sort of Jimi's blazing technical ability, his showmanship. But that's such like the smallest equation of what makes him great. You know, And it's oftentimes the things that people are most apt to impersonate or to assimilate or to, you know, it's the thing that's imitated the most is like that sort of, that element of Jimi's greatness and also of Bonham's greatness, I feel. And that's so missing the point of Jimi's greatness. I mean, yes, he was an incredible performer, humping his guitar. I mean, you know, what teenager sees the footage of him burning his guitar and humping his guitar and doing all that? Do you not want to be him? You know, I mean, that's part of it, you know, but it's a small part. And then, you know, obviously his technical prowess, playing with his teeth and going crazy and all that kind of stuff. But it's so, you know, I don't know. I just feel like it gets blown out of proportion. Because what made Jimi so great was he was this brilliant, all-around musician. He played chord inversions and came up with chord sequences that were so creative and so not like what was going on around him. He had a subtlety to him. He had the sense of dynamics. If you listen to live versions of him playing, he knew how to go from 0 to 100 and everything in between. He wasn't just on 100, you know. His rhythm playing, his sense of groove. But his writing, man, like, he could have just been a guitar player or just been a performer and made an impact on the world. That's more, he had more than enough to do that, I think. But he wrote and recorded and produced like Beatle level records. And that's incredible, man. You know, few people in the history of music have like kind of like reached that pinnacle of the mixture of like completely groundbreaking, completely, you know, innovative, and also like completely original and also incredibly successful. Like, I mean, it's like the perfect storm of that. Like the Beatles, Pink Floyd, you know, there's only a handful of people in that rarefied air. And, you know, no other like guitar heroes, if you will, can even come close to Jimi's genius when it comes to that. Like, I mean, just to listen to those records, even all these years later, it's just incredible. They're works of art. Sonically, his use of his lyric writing was really beautiful. It invoked, like, it's just so visual. Everything you can kind of see in your head, like a kaleidoscope in your mind, listening to his songs. And so, you know, that's really what I kind of, you know, I don't really go back and listen to a lot of, you know, you guys see here on the show every week, like what I'm kind of into and what I listen to. And I don't really go back and listen to a lot of like the rock stuff. I love it. Like, I love the Allman Brothers, you know, and I love the Beatles, and I love the Rolling Stones, and, you know, on and on and on and on. But, I don't really listen to that stuff that much. I don't reach for it. You know, I'm always reaching for something either I haven't heard that much, or something that is deeper. It's something that I haven't listened to as much, you know, put it that way. But man, every once in a while I'll go back and listen to Hendrix, and it's just as amazing. And it always leaves me in a very creative mindset. Like, it doesn't steer me in a negative way. It always kind of steers me in a real positive, creative way, and it's just because he was so creative. And that's the thing to take away from Jimi Hendrix. You know, he truly was great. Like, you know, he happened to be a guitar player. He could have easily played any other instrument. He could have easily been a saxophone player or something, and he would have been just as brilliant, I'm sure. You know, just as innovative. And it is amazing to me to look at, 50 years, and it's like that. Really, I can't think of anyone that even comes close. I mean, he is a singular kind of historic individual. Like, I think, if humankind exists hundreds of years from now, you know, people will look back and they'll remember the Beatles, and they'll remember Bob Dylan, and they'll remember Jimi Hendrix, they'll remember Miles Davis. You know, like there's a real special thing, and I sure wish he could have created a little bit longer here, but such as it was, you know, apparently his time to exit and enter the next realm, and it's a shame. It really is. And I could go on and on about my thoughts about his passing. I'm not going to do that here. Me and Jimmy James from the Delvon Lamar Organ Trio went off on a tirade about that a few weeks ago on the Instagram podcast, and it was really funny. But nonetheless, bless you, Jimmy, and fly on. You're the greatest. Amen? Amen. All right. So moving on, I'm actually gonna talk about some gear stuff for you. I got a lot of questions because I posted this photo on Instagram the other day from Kane's, and yeah, my duo rig is about triple what my normal rig is, and I'll explain to you what I'm doing. So, you know, for any of the live stuff that I'm doing, whether it's full band or whatever these days, obviously you guys know I'm really into the Ampeg Geminis. So the Gemini 1 is still my favorite. That's up there on the top right underneath the Kane sign. And then I've got my Gemini 2 underneath it, which is the one with the 15-inch speaker. And I've got that there as sort of an alternate or a backup. I like the Gemini 1, my Gemini 1 at least, slightly more. So I've got those. That's the main thing. Then next to that is my old Showman 215 cab. And this is where it gets interesting. So the way that I'm using that is with the Duo Show. Next to the Showman cab, you see I've got a Shure Vocal Master PA, which I have that I've talked about on the show, and I have it for actually some of these private shows that are coming up to sing through, because it actually works great. And, you know, let's be honest, you know, if JD Simo comes rolling up to do a private show for you and your friends, am I going to be playing through some modern computerized JBL thing? Hell no. I'm talking state-of-the-art 1966, baby. So anyway, back to the photo. So I've got the Shure Vocal Master, which is that big thing on top of the road case underneath the Alamo combo on the left. And I'm actually playing baritone guitar through it into the Showman cab. I've found that playing guitar through the Vocal Master is amazing, because you can get it to distort in a really interesting way, and it's got an awesome reverb tank in it, and it's got a ton of power. So I actually have a free Electro Harmonics freeze pedal going into a volume pedal that goes into the Vocal Master, which is running that 215 Showman cab right there. And I would create little bed parts, or, you know, basically anytime you see me in the footage picking up the Jazz Master there on the right, I have that tuned all the way down to B. I'm playing through the Vocal Master. So the last thing is the old Alamo, the 1949 Alamo, which I got from my dear buddy Charlie. And that I had set up to play some of the John Lee Hooker tunes, because it just sounds perfect for that stuff. And I had Red and my ES5 and my old Jazz Master, and then I also have my Red K Craft for the John Lee Hooker tunes, which is right back here. So, and then I have my normal pedal board that I was playing guitar through, which has the fuzz face and the Jack's Fuzzwa and the Strymon El Capistan. So it worked out really well having the different sounds that I could switch between and vary it some, and also to have that low end where I could blend it in if I wanted to was really, really hip. And I just sat down here and I just was like trying to figure out, like, you know, how I could do that. You know, like it reminds me of when I when I went on tour with Tommy Manuel the first time, and I had to play solo for the first time on tour. And I actually spent a good amount of time figuring out how I would do that, and that's kind of what Adam and I did, and it was really fun because it's like taking a lot of inspiration from Tony Joe White and Lightning Hopkins, certainly, and it was really fun. So, and another thing I want to talk about gear-wise before I move on to the bulk of the show here is I'm actually I still have the strings on there from the other night and rehearsing. I've lovingly switched over to Nashville's String Joy strings. I love these things, man. These are pure nickel round core. So these are like strings were made back in the 60s. They sound very different than modern strings. They've got a softer, funkier sound. They just don't sound all plinky and bright and like stuff I don't like. And I like the way they feel. They're also really great folks. It's a small little company. My buddies Joey Landreth and Ariel Posen are also with them. I'm turning a lot of people on to them because these are really groovy, man. And especially in these times that we're in, being with a homegrown company like that, I really value that a lot. And I dig them, man. And I didn't break any strings, which is unprecedented for me. I used to always break at least one. And and I love the way they sound. They're funky. I mean, these are all dead now, but that's what I want them to sound like. I mean, seriously, like that's what I want them to sound like. I don't want them all bright and And the big thing with strings is once you start getting distorted and have fuzz on it or a lot of gain or something, you can't really tell the difference. Where you can tell the difference is when you play clean. That's when you can tell, That's where you can hear the big difference, is with the clean sounds. And I'm playing cleaner and cleaner, unless I'm using fuzz. I'm playing cleaner and cleaner these days, so it makes sense why I switched. So thank you very much, my boy Blake over there at String Joy. I love you. He's been going through some tough times out in the Oregon way with all the fires and stuff. I love you, Blake. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm going to play one more tune, and then we're going to get into talking some Earl Hooker. You with me? You with me now? Nah, we'll do something up tempo. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do, JD? I don't know. Now, we'll do two bugs. I know I've done it before, but two bugs. Earl Hooker. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know I've talked about him a lot on the show, but I wanted to actually, give you a well-rounded kind of insight into one of my biggest heroes, Earl Hooker. At this point, I mean, I've done the show so many times that it's like a big thing for me that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of, at this point, build a catalog of, some of these people I've had to dig real deep to find information about that's credible and so on and so forth. And, just wanting to have these to kind of live up on YouTube, that if somebody in the future searches Earl Hooker or searches Eddie Taylor or something like that, that they might be able to access some information that might be a little harder to find. Or Lightning Hopkins, or any of the number of people I've talked about, Teenie Hodges, Michael Tolles. I mean, I'm proud at this point that it's been like, I think I'm at like 100 and I've talked about 140 or 150 albums, different albums on the show, and well over 100 artists, and that's really awesome. I'm really proud of that, because that's what it's about. It's about filling your tank and showing where you got it from. The ones that act like they came up with something, those are the ones you got to look out for, to say the least. So, in any rate, Earl Hooker got some awesome photos as usual to share with you guys. Here's him in the studio with his custom colored double neck. Side note, folks, where the hell did Earl Hooker get all these cool guitars? Every photo you ever look at, like if you go on Pinterest and do a search for Earl Hooker, you see him with custom color Barney Kessel's, Trini Lopez's, custom color SG, double neck, custom color. I don't understand where he got all these amazing guitars, but man, did he have some cool guitars. Lord have mercy. So, the great Earl Hooker. Really, in my life, I mean, it's like there's, those of you who watch the show all the time, I mean, the big ones for me that have made probably the biggest impact on me are people like Lightning Hopkins, Earl Hooker, Magic Sam, Eddie Hazel from Funkadelic, Michael Tolles from Isaac Hayes' band, and Jimmy Vaughn, and the list fans out from there with a lot of the kind of normal, B.B. King, Freddie King, Grant Green, onward from there, Jimi Hendrix, obviously, but that kind of core of some of the more esoteric choices, Earl's right there, and that's why I talk about him all the time. So he was born in Mississippi, like a lot of people, but he actually moved to Chicago before anybody else, because his family relocated there in 1930, which is very, very quick. The great kind of migration, if you will, was still about a decade away from happening, where huge numbers of people from the South were moving up to Chicago to seek factory jobs. So, so really, for all intents and purposes, Earl grew up in Chicago. He really didn't grow up in Mississippi like most of his peers. He was a city boy from his youngest age. He did indeed have a very famous, talented cousin. Music ran in his family. His cousin is the great John Lee Hooker. This is a great photo of John Lee in Detroit. One of my favorite early promo photos that I could found, in color nonetheless. I was happy to find this. And nonetheless, John Lee taught. John Lee's a little older than Earl, and John Lee did teach Earl a lot in the earliest days of Earl learning to play. Earl, by all accounts, was about 10 years old when he started to play guitar, and John was really helpful in sort of teaching him the basics, and really was an early mentor. One of the things about Earl is he had a really bad stutter, and he stuttered his whole life. but he didn't stutter when he was playing music, which there's a lot of, idiosyncratic things, I guess, like, a person who has a really bad stutter sometimes can sing, and they can sing without stuttering, things like that. So anyway, early on, Earl was kind of a loner because of his bad stutter, and also, unfortunately, when he was super, super young, like 7, 8 years old, he got tuberculosis. And he spent most of his young life in and out of hospitals. And obviously his family didn't come from affluence, so it was, city hospitals in Chicago in the 30s. Not the greatest amount of care. But nonetheless, he was a sickly, stuttering kid that he sort of hid in music, which I certainly can relate to hiding in music as a child and a lot of other people. As he grew up and got a little older into his teens, he started playing on the street corners. I've talked about Maxwell Street a bunch on the show. The Maxwell Street markets in Chicago being a really popular place for people to frequent, and a great place for musicians to play and make extra money, especially in the 40s and the 50s. It was still going on in the 60s, but the heyday of it was definitely the 40s and the 50s. And Earl was right there with the first crop of them. And he actually became really close friends as a teenager with a young Bo Diddley. About 10 years before Bo would go on to do the things he did, they were friends early on, playing Maxwell Street together as teenagers. And they would play on opposite corners from one another and try and draw people to each other. They would work as a team instead of working in competition. So the big thing that happened in the early life, as far as inspiration-wise, is in around 1942, Earl saw T-Bone Walker play. And T-Bone Walker, who I've talked about on the show a bunch, became Earl's biggest hero. He became enamored with T-Bone's playing and his showmanship, because T-Bone was the first guy to play behind his head and with his teeth and all the stuff, and doing splits and stuff like that, all things that Hendrix would become known for 20 years later, he was doing in the 40s. And so the initial kind of single string playing all that kind of playing really Earl became obsessive about it, and he learned it, and he followed T-Bone around, learned some from him, but again, he was a sickly, stuttering kid, so he was kind of a weird kid. And but that was a big thing. Because T-Bone became a huge hero for him, especially with the single note playing, which would be such a huge inspiration to B.B. King as well. And this is a good 8 years or so before BB starts doing what he's going to do. So just to give you perspective on the time frame we're talking. The other big hero that steps in around the same time is another guy I've talked about on the show before, the great Robert Nighthawk. And Robert Nighthawk was already a mainstay at the Maxwell Street Market playing, and his slide style is the basis of Earl's entire slide style. So basically, and I've talked about Robert Nighthawk on the show. Please go and listen to Live on Maxwell Street 64 if you haven't. It really is the Bible of this kind of playing. And Robert is another very underrated, not talked about nearly enough how important he was. And he was certainly one of the first. I mean, we're talking about the mid-40s here. But so you have the sort of T-Bone influence on Earl for the single string. And then you have the Robert Nighthawk, got those two things, and that's what makes up the nucleus of Earl Hooker's playing. And Robert would play in standard tuning and in open tunings. Earl, for whatever reason, found it most advantageous to stay in standard tuning, and that became another big part of his style. And his rationale is the same as my rationale. So when I became obsessed with Earl Hooker, the thing that was funny is, he always played in standard, and his rationale was, well, I want to be able to play slide or straight guitar at any given time and not have to think about it. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm coming from. So, boy did he. So around the same time, he meets a very young Junior Wells. Okay, he meets a very young Junior Wells playing on the street corners and playing around. This is obviously years before Junior plays in the Muddy Waters Blues Band in the late 50s and goes on to do his thing. He's a young kid. Junior is about 10 years younger than Muddy Waters and T-Bone Walker and all those guys, and Earl is sort of like 5-6 years younger than those guys, and Junior, so like that kind of bridges the gap age-wise of these guys a bit. But it's notable that they met then as well and played with each other in the street corner. So, just imagine, if you will, folks, like, again, like, you got Bo Diddley, you got Robert Nighthawk, you got Earl Hooker, you've got Jimmy Rogers and Muddy Waters and Little Walter. These are all guys playing on the street in Maxwell Street in Chicago. It's just amazing to think about, like, good God. So, through the beginning of the 1950s, Earl mostly tours as the second guitar player around with Robert Nighthawk, mostly going to the South, or they would go maybe to Detroit, or they might go to like Cincinnati, or they might go to Indianapolis or something like that, or up to Milwaukee. Not far, we're talking about, hopping literally in a station wagon and going and playing a 7-hour night at a club. That's what these guys did. But around 1952, he starts recording. Earl starts recording for people, which is still very early. Okay? And he mostly gets relegated to being a side musician because his voice isn't the greatest. Okay? So this is what becomes difficult about sort of excavating Earl Hooker discography is he did a lot of recording and it's not credited. You have to really dig. And he backed a lot of people. Stuff that was on his, like, was listed as Earl Hooker, there's only a handful. The best, I would say, is his stuff that he recorded with Junior Wells, but also stuff that he recorded behind A.C. Reed and even Jackie Brenston is fairly easy to find. And there's really good compendiums on Spotify and stuff. Like, this is a good one. This is Earl Hooker, the Chief Sessions. Chief was a label that he became the house guitarist for, and it's, this is a collection of him mostly playing behind other people or doing these funky instrumentals that, would get released just to a few jukeboxes or something. So that's a really good thing to pick up if you want to get hip to some of this from the 50s. So, getting back to the Junior Wells thing, Buddy Guy didn't get to Chicago until the late 50s. And so, for most of the 50s and for most of the early 60s, Junior's best records, before Hoodoo Man, of course, which is Buddy Guy, but like Messin' with the Kid, okay, which I played a bit of earlier, That's Earl Hooker playing on that record. And also his big hit, Little by Little, that's Earl Hooker playing on that. So all of the earliest Junior Wells, so that's another thing, if you want to go and listen to early Junior Wells up until about 62, 63, that's all Earl Hooker playing guitar. And that's my favorite, actually. I love Buddy Guy, but I love the way Earl played with Junior. It's just amazing. And it was Junior's biggest songs were originally with Earl Hooker on guitar, and I prefer those versions, and I stand by that. The next big thing that happened is I'm going to take a swig of root beer. We're going to take a pause for the cause. Weber's, love you. All right, I'm back. So, a big thing that happened is one of these sort of instrumentals that he cuts. He ends up calling it blue guitar. Shook me. What ended up happening was Earl cut the whole track and called it blue guitar. Leonard Chess from Chess Records took the song, had Willie Dixon write words to it, and they just overdubbed Muddy Waters' voice on top of Earl Hooker's track and called it You Shook Me, which obviously would be copied by Led Zeppelin and Jeff Beck Group and a whole bunch of others, and became a hit for Muddy. But that's Earl Hooker's track. That's him playing guitar. So that was another big thing, in like another feather in Earl's cap. So moving into, now into like the mid '60s. Earl's been working this whole time. He's not become famous or anything, but he's making a living, and he certainly is surrounded by the greatest of the great, and is very revered. B.B. King even said multiple times that if there was a best, it was Earl Hooker. And the thing that they all talked about was the fact that, not only could he play single string, like in the style of B.B. or Freddie King or any of the others at the time, but then he was this phenomenal slide player, which all of them couldn't do. And then the other thing is, and I waited until now to talk about this, is, Earl loved country music. He loved the Grand Ole Opry. He grew up listening to the Grand Ole Opry. And that was another big influence on him. He loved Ernest Tubb. He loved it. So that's why a lot of his tone is very bright, because he loved Billy Byrd. He loved Leon Rhodes, the country swingy guys. He loved Tiny Moore, who played with Bob Wills. And he was known in his club show to do things like that, and to essentially play those types of tunes that were way out of the wheelhouse of any of his peers. Yet another thing that I feel like a kinship with Earl Hooker with, because of my years and years playing bluegrass and playing country music. And it makes sense. He was a very well-rounded musician. But unfortunately, the tuberculosis would come back from time to time and land him in the hospital. And it got to a point by 67 or so where doctors actually advised him to stop performing. It was too much strain on him. But he went against the doctor's orders, like any good bluesman would. And he put together a new band, and he actually did something pretty revolutionary. He started a band, and had a pedal steel player in the band, a guy named Freddie Roulette. This is a photo of Earl Hooker and Freddie Roulette playing at Teresa's Lounge on the south side of Chicago, which I've talked about on the show here before. Freddie was a big fan of Hawaiian music, and he also was a really big fan of everything I was just talking about, Speedy West and Don Helms, who played with Hank Williams. And so there was this whole kind of melding, if you will, in the clubs. There's no recorded evidence, really, of the sort of concept that Earl had in his mind to sort of meld blues and country music and swing and all this kind of stuff. Because right around this time is when his iconic records like Two Bugs and a Roach come out. And his affiliation with the Arhui label, which is kind of the one that is the most successful as far as Earl Hooker working under his own name, you know. But, I mean, who knows? I've read stories and heard things from other folks about, like, what it may have been like to be in a club and hear that version of the Earl Hooker band. Pretty interesting stuff. And I really wish that more existed. I'd love to know what he was up to. So this leads to 1969, which was a really big year for Earl. The success of the Two Bugs and a Roach record gets him out playing more shows under his own name, mostly in package tours. In 1969 in particular, he played a bunch playing in Junior Wells's band and in John Lee Hooker's band, as well as doing like his own opening shows, opening sets, if you will, before Junior and John Lee came out. And you know, they played the Fillmores, they played the Whiskey a Go Go, they played all the hippie places because it was 1969. And so Earl was just starting to get kind of exposed properly, and he went on that fateful European tour, which also featured Magic Sam, which is why we have the only footage that exists of both Magic Sam and Earl Hooker is the show in Germany, where they lost Magic Sam's guitar, and so his black Univox Les Paul that says Earl Hooker on it, like he let Magic Sam borrow it. And that's some really great footage. It's not the best footage because you can tell that they're just kind of winging it, and it's raw, which is what's cool about it. But you can tell that they're also maybe being a little bit more flamboyant, a little bit crazier, trying to please the rock audience rather than just doing artistically what it is that was in their heart to do. But nonetheless, he comes home from that tour and unfortunately passes away relatively quick. He dies in 1970 from tuberculosis. He was only 40 years old, and that was the end of that. And another note I want to say just about like the cool aspects of Earl is, Earl was an early adopter. Like, I mean, he used wah-wah pedal a lot. I've shown you a million times on the show about it, but he loved using the wah-wah pedal, and he also was really fond of using fuzz tones, especially towards the end. I did my own version of an old Ike Turner tune called "You Got to Lose" several weeks ago. It's on the YouTube channel. But Earl did an awesome fuzzy, sort of a sort of version of the same tune, and he loved like fuzz tones and wah-wah pedals and all that, and that's another reason why it's like, he's like my spirit animal, because it's like traditional, completely traditional, but also open to that aspect of it as well. Just love him. So that brings us to the end. Obviously, I know the great Sue Foley down in Austin. She's a huge fan of Earl Hooker. There still isn't a ton of kind of apparent influence out there in the world. all of my buddies, of course, are really into him. The GA20 guys and Patrick Sweeney and Jimmy James and my buddy Johnny Moeller down in Austin. I love you, bud. But he's my guy. He's one of my big guys. Him, Lightning Hopkins, Michael Tolles, Eddie Hazel. There's a big influences on me. And like I said, when I found Earl's music, it really kind of opened me up in a way that there was just all these things about his playing, like I've explained here, that just really kind of hit me. And I was like, man, that is so cool. I totally get that, And sure wish I could have seen him play, and I sure wish there was more footage that exists of him and more music. But unfortunately, there isn't. So, without further ado, I would like to, this is yet another archive song from the House of Grease. This is a version of Anna Lee. Anna Lee is actually on my new record. But this that I'm about to play for you right now is an outtake of myself with Adam Bednarik and Adam Abershoff and my dear friend Anson Funderburgh playing it. I found some more old footage of Chicago, a lot of footage from the Maxwell Street Market, and also kind of Chicago in the 60s and the Loop, and a lot of some of the neighborhoods that I remember when I was a kid and what they looked like before the whole gentrification process started, and now they don't look like that anymore. So without further ado, sit back and chill, and here's an outtake version of Anna Lee coming at you from the House of Grease. Check it.
I want you for my own, Anna Lee. Anna Lee. I want you for my own, Anna Lee. Gonna be mine. You just hang around and see. Enemy, that's such a guy, Anna Lee. believe.
There you have it, folks. Anna Lee with my dear friend Anson Funderburgh, cut right here in the Funky Basement. So here we are again. Thank you very much for joining me, and really appreciate you tuning in. And like I said, I'll miss you for these next couple of weeks out in the world doing some stuff. But don't you worry, I will be back, and got some videos and stuff that I'll be posting on the YouTube channel in the meantime. And really hope that you've enjoyed yourself tonight. I hope I've entertained you some. Hopefully I've been informative. And yeah, got some new records hopefully you'll check out. So just take care of yourselves. And yeah, I feel pretty good. You all feel good too? All right. Drop some tips in the tip jug if you're so inclined. Check out the new record. Stream it. All the above. And I'll see you soon. I promise. All right? So much love and chicken grease from the House of Grease in the Funky Basement. Y'all take care and keep it greasy, okay? Much love. JD out.